What is OCD? According to the National Institute of Mental Health, obsessive compulsive disorder, also known as OCD, is a long-lasting disorder in which a person experiences uncontrollable and recurring thoughts, obsessions, engages in repetitive behaviors or compulsions, or both. People with OCD have time-consuming symptoms that can cause significant distress or interfere with daily life. Although the exact causes of OCD are unknown, various risk factors increase the chances of developing the disorder. Genetics, biology, temperament, and childhood trauma can be risk factors. Now, what is anxiety? According to the National Institute of Mental Health, occasional anxiety is a normal part of life. Many people worry about things such as health, money, or family problems. But anxiety disorders involve more than temporary worry or fear. For people with an anxiety disorder, the anxiety does not go away and can get worse over time. The symptoms can interfere with daily activities such as job performance, schoolwork, and relationships. And this week, I will do a deep dive reflection on My Mind Now, a song by Paris Paloma, which highlights how OCD and anxiety can be born after a traumatic relationship or event. Hi, I am Raysa, a survivor of narcissistic abuse, and I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And you are listening to Hello Trauma Brain, a podcast where I share my experiences living with complex PTSD. My hope is this podcast can help destigmatize mental health and provide support to anyone diagnosed with CPTSD who thinks they might have it or has a loved one with this diagnosis. Quick reminder, I am not a licensed psychologist or mental health care professional, and this podcast is not meant to replace nor substitute the care of psychologists, other mental or medical health care professionals. If you think you might have complex PTSD or PTSD, please reach out to your primary care or mental health care provider. Any individuals or resources mentioned in this episode are not sponsoring Hello Trauma Brain. This episode may reference trauma or abuse, and listener discretion is advised. Remember, you can always pause or skip this episode at any time. And now, let's get back to the episode. Hello, dear survivors, and welcome to this episode of Hello Trauma Brain. Thank you for joining me today. Quick check-in. I guess it goes with the realm of this episode that I am experiencing OCD right now, even as I recorded the intro, even as I'm getting ready to record the rest of the episode. I think for me, the OCD shows up for me in many ways, and one of them is I want for the circumstances to be perfect, and if I perceive something not being perfect, then I should not be doing it, and that bleeds into how I show up for the podcast sometimes. Actually, not sometimes, I would say most of the time, but I'm going to try to exercise remaining present, letting go of that perfectionism and still recording the thing. In terms of the rest of my check-in, it's been a struggle in terms of my physical health. So I got food poisoning earlier this week, and then 2 days after that, I got an allergic reaction. So it's just been really hard for my body. I've been very fatigued, achy, just feeling just completely out of sorts. I want to say that Saturday was a blur of a day. I slept through most of Saturday. My brain was just not there at all. And it was pretty tough because part of me felt like I should have been outside enjoying the last of the later sunsets before we turn the clocks back. And There's a lot of, my inner kid had a lot of feelings about missing our time outside that day. But more years will come. The sun's not really going anywhere. It's more of a, we won't really be seeing too much sun after work during the week coming up for the next 2 to 3 months. And it'll be okay. We've done it before. Been doing it for years now. And this year will not be any different. And the sun will still be there during the day. And I can still have the sun during the weekend. And that's going to be that. Yeah, besides that, I'm feeling better right now, which is great. I'm glad that I am feeling more like myself. My body feels recovered for the most part. So today, I'm going to kick off the first illustration for season 2 of the podcast. And it's going to be a song illustration. So the song I picked this week is from Paris Paloma. And Paris Paloma is an English singer-songwriter and guitarist. And she gained prominence through the single Labor in 2023. I do remember hearing from Paris back when Labor came out, and I remember being very struck by that song, especially the video. If you have not seen the video for Labor, I strongly recommend it. And I do want to do an illustration on that song too. But today I want to do an illustration instead on the opening song for her debut album, Cacophony. And the song is called My Mind Now. The interesting thing about My Mind Now is that I technically heard it when I listened to her album. Her album came out, I want to say back in August of this year. Part of it hit me, but it didn't quite hit me. And for me, sometimes, depending on where I am in my life, things will just hit differently. And that's what happened with that song. So recently, Paris did a Audio Tree live session, and she opened the session with the same opening song from her album, My Mind Now. And let me tell you, the live version of the song really hits differently for me. Like, I've gone back to listen to the studio version, and it's really good. It's an excellent song. But there's something about the live performance. It's a little bit longer. And I talked about this last week even with Sarah Bareilles. Like, there are some artists that they're fantastic studio artists too. But when you hear them live, there's this passion and this feeling that comes through. You can't quite capture it on a studio session. There's something about being live, that sentiment. And Paris definitely achieved that in her Audio Tree session, and her live rendition of My Mind Now. It really hit me differently, and I was immediately obsessed, and I went on a new deep dive of her content, because I knew about her, but I didn't quite go on a deep dive like I have recently. And I had to do an illustration on that song, because as I learned more about what it meant for her, and as I reflected about what it meant for me listening to it, it felt very significant. So about the song, I did find an article from Cloud written by Kieran Rogers, which quotes Paris talking about this song. And the quote goes, "My mind now is about the BC and the AD of trauma and what it did to my mental state. The feeling that an event was so cataclysmic that it rearranged the chemical makeup of my mind." Paris Paloma continues to say on this release, "The song is a reflection of my struggle with OCD and anxiety as a response to traumatic events and the electrical storm of emotions that exist inside my head, filling it with noise that never seems to leave as I search for a few seconds of respite and quiet from it. It is also about the power other people hold to set that trauma into motion and both the fragility and strength of the human mind. My mind now is an embodiment of the act of creation in the form of art and writing as a coping mechanism that comes out of the overwhelming noise and chaos of the mind." That was very powerful. Because when I heard the song, my first instinctual thing was, this song is surviving from narcissistic abuse. Like, this is a narcissist that we're dealing with here. Like, that's really what struck me when I heard the song. And when I read this expert on Paloma talking about how the song is about her OCD and anxiety, it hit me even more. Oh, that makes sense in terms of how the song begins and ends. The song begins and ends with this repeating motif. And if you want to capture OCD in a song, you just have to pretty much grab a line and just keep repeating it over and over, because that's really what it is. OCD is like a loop. Like, you get stuck in it and it's the same thing regurgitating, and it's really hard to end the loop and escape it. And that brings me into beginning to dive into the lyrics. So the song begins with an a cappella repetition of this line that goes, "What did I do wrong? Will you tell me what I did wrong? What did I?" As it repeats itself, I think in the studio version they kind of build the whole thing together, but in the audio tree, like I really love the audio tree version of this. In that session, and they had it pre-recorded, I noticed from seeing the visual. So in this pre-recorded excerpt, they had the line repeat itself over and over, and every time more harmonies would be introduced to really fill in the texture of that section. It's beautiful. The harmonies are gorgeous, and it just really captures that. What did I do wrong? Would you tell me? What did I do wrong? Will you tell me? What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Will you tell me? It just keeps going on and on and on. And it builds up and it gets louder. Another thing I want to point out is that this repeating section actually remains in the background replaying as the song continues. And I thought that was a very powerful thing to do. And quite frankly, I think it's intentional, because that really captures what OCD is and what anxiety also do to a human brain. Like, they remain in the background constantly. And even though you're doing other things or you're trying to focus on other things, the anxiety and the OCD remain in the background, very active and very distracting. And even though in the song, the repetition doesn't actually get in the way of the rest of the song, like it's still working together, if you were to try to pay attention to that, you might miss the other sections of the song that are playing, like the lyrics or the other melodies. And again, it's a brilliant way to capture it through art. And then she begins with, was it a first offense? That question, you could go many ways with that. And to me, that first question is so important, because when you're in a narcissistic relationship, you're trying to figure out what the hell you're doing wrong that's causing all this. You don't really think for a second it could be the other person. You think it has to be me. And, you're starting to figure out, like, is it something that I keep doing? Is it something that I did for the first time? You can't quite figure out what's going on. To me, that question just fully captures the confusion you feel when you're in an abusive relationship and you're struggling to find sense and find the root of what is causing the other person's behavior. The next line in the song goes, how long had you been harboring that venom? So if you've been through a narcissistic relationship and woken up from it, you might relate to this. When you start looking back, one of the hardest things to reconcile is realizing that the malicious intent was there from the beginning. And when I hear that line, how long had you been harboring that venom? It was almost like that disbelief, like, was this venom always there? If you're dealing with a true narcissist, yeah, it was there from the beginning. We just couldn't see it. And so far, this song has featured questions. Every single line up to this point is questions. And I find that so important to point out, because that's really the experience of a survivor that's starting to notice something is going on. There's a lot of question marks without good enough answers. And then even after you wake up, there's a lot of wondering, a lot of confusion that goes into trying to make sense of things. Now, as the song continues, this next line is not a question. It says, you could have used your words then. That line takes me back to a particular relationship I was in, where every time I would confront the other person with something they had done that hurt me, they would bring a laundry list of things I had done like 3 months ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. And that's how the fights would go every week. Like, I would bring up something and be like, hey, you said this thing and it hurt me. And then they would go, well, you did this thing 3 months ago that I didn't talk about, but I want to talk about it now. And I remember eventually starting to say back, like, why didn't you say something back then? How many times they didn't say something and then they strategically bring it up when you're confronting them about something. And moving on to the next line of the song, you wanted them to hurt, and so I let them. That sums up about every romantic relationship with a narcissistic person that I've been in. And I do have to shamefully admit that in some cases, when I was really upset and we were in the thick of it, I would say hurtful things too. And in my experience, when I've been in these narcissistic relationships, I've noticed that the use of words is very intentional. I had a particular abuser that would say things, and if you would say out loud that that was hurtful, they would say things like, well, I'm just saying the truth, like weaponizing the truth. And before I truly woke up, it wasn't so much that I was letting the words hurt me. It was more that the words were just hurtful and they just kept hurting me over and over. This line also reminds me of the powerlessness of being in these relationships, especially when you're not truly clear on what's happening. There's a sense of not having any control over how the other person continues to hurt you over and over again. The next line is, never would I beseech you. And I had to look up what beseech means, which is urgently ask for something. And that reminds me of something that happens in narcissistic relationships. At least that's been the case in my experience. You begin to ask for less and less. You learn that asking for things is almost dangerous. It's an opportunity for the words to come and hurt. It's an opportunity for things to get turned back at you. It's an opportunity for them to throw something they did back in your face. And, we're talking about something they did maybe years ago or months ago or 2 days ago, something you did not ask for. Usually that's how it goes, like some sort of gift that I didn't ask for, but now the gift is being thrown at my face, like almost like a get out of jail free card of like, but I already did this nice thing, so you don't get to ask for more. And then we get into the next line, which is, as some sadistic vengeance exercise. If there's a word I have heard in the narcissism realm, specifically Ramani, she'll use this word often, is sadism. Sadism is a big quality of narcissistic people, especially when it comes to like malignant narcissistic people. And there's an intentionality with that. There's this malicious intent to hurt the other person. And Paris's choice of words here is just, it's brilliant. Sadistic, vengeance, exercise. Those three words together. That almost sums up how survivors get treated by abusers. To them, it is an exercise. To them, it's almost like this casual thing. And it's part of course to be constantly taking vengeance and holding all this resentment and holding all this contempt towards the other person. And when you're on the receiving end of that, it really feels awful. The next line in this song goes, to endure what you put me through, I don't think you would pull out on the other side. This reminds me of the concept of people that abuse behind closed doors. Part of you knows and notices that they don't act this way in public, which is one of the things that Dr. Ramani Durvasula argues is the telltale sign that they do know what they're doing. Because if they didn't know what they were doing, they would treat you that way in front of other people. But when you notice that the narcissistic person or your abuser is treating you differently in front of the people they respect, and then the moment you're in the car, the moment you get back to the house, all hell breaks loose, like that alone is a huge sign that they actually have the capacity to control it and hold it back, but it's limited, and they know when they can get away with it. And yeah, that concept of like, you're enduring all this abuse and they don't pull it in public. They don't pull it in front of other people, which is why a lot of abusers have a really good public image. And it's painful. And I'm going to take this opportunity to, bring to awareness. When you hear of someone speaking up about their abuser, be very careful. Very careful. To take what they're saying and compare it to your own experience of that person if you happen to know them or if you've interacted with them. It's really important to learn to hold space for different realities. And the fact that you might have had a very pleasant and lovely interaction with someone doesn't mean that they're not abusing other people behind closed doors. So please keep that in mind when you hear survivors speak up, because a lot of survivors, we get dismissed based on how what we are speaking up about doesn't match what other people have seen themselves. And both things can be true, like just like I cannot negate that my abusers have treated other people wonderfully and they think very highly of them. Like that's true. I can't negate that. I can't go, well, they abused me, so there's no way they treated somebody else well. No, they can treat other people well. And I've seen it happen. They do. And in the same way, someone who's been treated well by my abusers should not be dismissing and going, well, they treated me well, there's no way they abused that person. Oh, if you could only know, you could only be a fly on the wall, how shocked you would be. It's really important to be aware of that, especially when you hear of an abuser that's someone that you know or someone that you already have created an opinion of. Two things can be true. I know it can be very uncomfortable to sit with that, but I urge you to do so, especially next time that you are interacting with someone who is speaking up about what happened to them. At this point, the song shifts and it just becomes this badass, amazing cacophony, for lack of a better word. This is the name of the album. From hearing interviews with Paris, she does talk about how it's the cacophony of the mind, like how chaotic it is up there. And this just captures it beautifully. It starts with, I know you had a temper, but I guess I thought I was immune. That is the line that stopped me in my tracks. This reminds me of a clip I saw in the last few months. So basically, Dr. Ramani Durvasula has this membership called the Dr. Ramani Network. And she had licensed independent clinical social worker Patrick Tehan on this membership. And they posted a soundbite, a clip of the interview on social media. And the clip basically features Dr. Ramani asking Patrick, what is the definitive symptom of childhood trauma? And Patrick responds, I'm going to paraphrase this here, it is trying to get a difficult person to be good to us. And when he said it, you could see Dr. Ramani's mind just blow, which, it's pretty much what this line did for me too. In my experience, when I've been around narcissistic people, I know they're difficult. I know they have a temper. I know they have anger issues. I know that you gotta walk on eggshells, and at any point in time, you might step on the thing and it's gonna be a landmine and you're gonna blow up to smithereens. You know it. But you are constantly trying to get to a place where you can make it work. And making it work looks like it doesn't affect me. And this line just nails it when it goes, but I guess I thought I was immune. That is the mantra of a survivor that is still trying to make that relationship work. You start thinking that you can get to a place where you're immune, it won't hurt, and it won't affect you. And that is a huge lie. And not realizing that you are not immune can keep you stuck there until it completely decimates you. And the next line goes, felt it as you severed my mind, tore it all of the way through. You do feel it. You do feel your brain changing. And that is where I would argue that you start developing anxiety and things like OCD. Like in my case, being in these relationships truly changed the chemistry of my brain. This is something I heard Anna Runkle, she has a YouTube channel called The Crappy Childhood Fairy. Anna said in her channel once that complex PTSD is a brain injury. And that completely changed me. And that was the moment where I realized, oh my gosh, this is a brain injury. This is how serious this is. Like having someone abuse you to the point that your brain changes like it would had I hit my head really hard against some sort of hard surface, like in an accident. Like having something that changes your brain permanently is a big deal. And just because people can't see My head doesn't have a huge bandage around it all the time. Doesn't mean it's not there. And I do have a brain injury. My brain is different from other brains that have not been through trauma. And that's something that I need to still reckon with every day. And I've learned to accept it. It's not something that defines me per se. Like, I don't think I am damaged or broken or, I don't think that there's no hope for me. Once I came to terms with my abusers have injured me internally and also externally because, this stuff also manifests somatically. At that point in time, I started to accept the reality of, okay, I need help. I need to do things differently. I need to accommodate my injury. I need to accommodate the fact that I am a trauma survivor. It doesn't have to be my identity, but I can't ignore it and pretend it's not there. I do have to incorporate into my life things that make my life easier as a trauma survivor. The next line in this song goes, "And I was strawberry picking. You were gathering ammunition to use." In these relationships, the survivor is truly engaged with doing wonderful things and thinking that we can get to a point where we're strawberry picking and doing all these exciting things. And every single activity, the other person, the abuser, they're just looking for something that they can use. Something that, goes back to that, what did I do wrong from the beginning of this song? Like, imagine someone strawberry picking and whoever they're with, instead of being involved and helping with the strawberries, they're literally gathering ammunition to use later. Ammunition to treat them like they did something wrong. That vengeance, that sadistic exercise. And it goes back to that you can't get it right with a narcissist. There's never a world where you did it correctly. You might feel like you can get to a place where you get it right and it stops. And I'll raise my hand and admit I've done that. I've totally lived in that fallacy of, I'm going to get it right. If I do it this way, or if I can figure it out, it'll stop. But I never did. And it would have never stopped. And the only way it stopped for me was when I stepped away. And the next line goes, "And the shrapnel digs in." And I also had to look up what shrapnel was. And it is a collective term for shot, fragments, or debris thrown out by an exploding shell, bomb, or landmine. And it kind of goes back to that landmine. Like, you feel like you're walking on landmines, and at one point it is going to explode, and the fragments will just dig in your skin. It will. It's just a matter of when, not a matter of if. And then we go into the finale line of this section, which also stopped me in my tracks more than any other line, quite frankly, in the song. "My mind has not been silent since you." If there is any line that can sum up what happens to the brain of a survivor of abuse, it is that one right there. Your mind will not be silent since that event. It might never be. In my case, the trauma did lead to the development of my OCD and my anxiety. Depending on who you ask, my CPTSD is at the root of the OCD and the anxiety. And you can say that the CPTSD is at the root of the trauma. Like, it's a complicated web. But if we go to the tip top of what set the domino effect in motion, it was the trauma. And I absolutely invite you to listen to the song, either the studio version or the Audio Tree live performance. You will experience on both versions that at this point, when this line goes, she starts, there's like ad-libs and like screaming, like just interlayered into this section, and it's loud and it's dissonant and it's messy. It really sounds like a fucking mess, and it's supposed to, because that is what it feels like in your mind. It's a fucking mess up there, and it's not silent at all. And then the song winds down with that repetitive section from the beginning. What did I do wrong? Will you tell me what I did wrong? What did I? What did I do wrong? Will you tell me what I did wrong? What did I? Paris, if you ever hear this, if I may answer that for you and for me and for anyone listening, if you are a survivor of abuse, the answer to that question is nothing. You did not do anything wrong. You did not deserve to be abused. Even if you made a mistake, that is something that gets worked out through healthy repair. No human being or living creature on this planet deserves to be abused. This song is so powerful. And this entire album is it's incredible. This album is a fantastic listen. It's beautiful in terms of, it's the production. It sounds gorgeous. The songs are just, there's so much power in them. And it really brings awareness to some really serious issues that we're dealing with in our society these days. Paris is a very wise singer-songwriter. If you've listened to interviews with Paris, she really carries herself it's almost like she's wiser than her age in many ways, given that she's admitted that, she's been through traumatic events that have led to OCD and anxiety in herself. I feel like when that happens to you, you grow up fast. And I can hear that. I can hear that in how she carries herself in interviews as well. The last thing I want to say about this, in terms of how I see OCD and anxiety developing from being in a narcissistic relationship. In my opinion, I cannot back this up with any research, mind you, but in my opinion, at least from looking back on my experience, the likelihood of my OCD and anxiety ramping up was going hand in hand with the length of the relationship. Like, the longer the relationship lasted and the longer I spent in that relationship trying to get it right, the worse the symptoms got. Because in relationships like this, getting it wrong and feeling like you're doing something wrong is such a constant reality, and you're trying to figure it out, and it almost becomes inevitable. Like, how do you not develop compulsions and rituals and perfectionism, right? Like, how do you not end up getting there if you are truly putting all your energy into getting this thing right, that in reality you cannot get right because you can't control the other person? When somebody else puts landmines all over you, like, there's only so much you can do to avoid not stepping on a landmine you don't know is there. I think depending on how long you spend doing this, like, it just becomes a part of your brain. Your brain changes and then it bleeds into everything else. And sadly for me, I still have OCD. I could be no contact with abusers for years and I still have the OCD and the anxiety. I still have CPTSD. That doesn't go away. I feel like the symptoms can improve when you're not constantly in those relationships, at least for me, even though, I can't control when something's going to aggravate the OCD and whatnot. I feel like if I was still in those relationships in the way that I used to be, it would really, things would be worse for me. There's no way it wouldn't be. That being said, I think that officially wraps up this song illustration of My Mind Now by Paris Paloma. And I will be linking Paris's website, the Audio Tree live performance, and all the other resources as usual in the show notes. In this week's healing invitation, I want to invite you to find a way to express your experience after trauma with art. It can be a song, poem, dance, short story, visual, painting. We don't get to choose when trauma happens to us, but when it comes to healing and expressing yourself, you do get to choose how you want to create. Reclaiming your agency and ability to choose is such a powerful moment when healing from trauma. Please let me know how this week's healing invitation goes if you choose to accept it. Before we wrap up this episode, all music and production is courtesy of yours truly. Also, I want to share a few ways you can help support this podcast. You can subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or the platform you are using to listen. Share this episode with anyone you think can benefit from this content. Follow Hello Trauma Brain on Instagram, subscribe to the Hello Trauma Brain YouTube channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell to be the first to know when I post a new episode. And you can make a donation by getting me a coffee. No worries, all links will be provided in the show notes. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you found this episode helpful. I wish you the best as you find ways to use art to heal from trauma. It is time for our farewell affirmations. I invite you to repeat after me. I welcome the belief that I am enough. I am lovable. And I deserve to heal. I wish you a gentle week and thank you for your presence.